Hi Afia, am I audible? Hi Afia, am I audible? Alright, thanks. Maybe let's just wait for a couple of more minutes. Uh, Hopefully, more people will join, I'm not sure. How have the lectures been going so far? All okay? Have you been finding this course interesting? Any other source? For questions related to this, as in this particular topic of this week, or is there some particular topic that you're interested in? Then, accordingly, I can suggest some resources. Are you looking for general ecology or oh, okay, so the entire course? Um, so that's a bit tricky because this particular course is just giving you an overview of all the broad topics in ecology. So independently you will find a lot of resources if you google every topic, but in terms of books there might be some general ecology books. I can look it up and recommend. I think it is Ecology by Peterson. uh, I am not really sure of the author, but there is like a textbook. I can look it up and let you know the name next week. But if there are any particular topics, then I could also suggest you on those. So, yeah. I think it's good to have an overview of everything so that you can get a glimpse as to what wildlife ecology entails, and probably there will be certain topics in it that catch more of your attention, so you can delve deeper into it. Okay, all right. We have about 5-6 people. So let me just introduce myself. I'm Chiti Arvind, your course TA for this, one of the three TAs for this course on wildlife ecology. We are in week 6 now, so halfway through the course. I hope all of you have been enjoying it so far, and I hope that we can have this as an interactive session again. Also, feel free to raise your hand to ask any questions. And I also do want to ask, do you have any questions from the previous weeks till now that you would like to be covered, or are there any particular topics that you found hard and you need more explanation? or any particular topics that you want to discuss more about? We're halfway through the course already. This is week 6, and week 6 focuses on community ecology. No? Everything has been okay so far? You can thumbs up to that if okay. Okay. All right. So maybe let's just start with the first question. So given on the slide is an image, and the image depicts something. So could you tell me what this image depicts? And could you explain these stages in your own words? So Afia says it's ecological succession. What about the others? Do you agree with her? Do you think there could be another term for this? Does everyone agree with Afia? Who do we have here with us? There's Aparna, Dhananjay, and Jaswant. Any ideas as to what this could be? Okay, so yeah, right. So it's more likely to be primary succession, right? Because of the stages. Afia, would you like to explain the stages or just go through it? Or anybody else, would you like to state what is happening out here? You can just state it in your own words. It doesn't have to follow any order. Primary succession. Okay. Nudation, migration. Okay, these are the names of these. Yes, sure, these are the stages. But what is really happening out here? What is happening in primary succession? There's something that is happening in this figure, right? As a progression from left to right. What does it look like? What is the biggest difference between stage 1 and stage 7? Okay. I understand. Gradually result to a climax community, but what are we starting with? Correct, right? We're starting with rock at the very first stage. There's absolutely nothing else. It's barren land, it's rock. And what do you think is happening in stage 2? Lichen comes, right? So what really are lichen? think it's only going to be Afia and me in the class today. Jaswant, would you have any idea what is lichen? Slow growing plant that typically forms, okay. If you're copy pasting from Google, that's also okay. It's a great source to learn, but maybe if you have any idea, even if it's not perfect, it is okay to also mention that. So don't worry about, yeah, giving exact definitions of things. So, for those who have just joined right now, this image, as shown on the screen, depicts primary succession, and we were just discussing the stages. So, the first stage is a barren rock phase. Stage 2 has some lichen that is inhabiting this rock phase. And what does this lichen actually do? What is the role of lichen in primary succession? And as Afia mentioned, lichen is composed of fungi and algae, and also it is what kind of a relationship, fungi and algae in lichen? Do you remember from the previous lectures? Symbiotic, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship between fungi and algae in the form of lichen. So lichen breaks rock material to make soil, right? Because we don't have soil for plants to grow on. So the first species to come and inhabit any barren surface is lichen, and that slowly breaks these rock-like structures to make soil. Now, after the soil comes into play, you have a set of plants growing, right? And you first start with some grasses, and then it goes on to some shrubs, and then finally you have these mature trees. Yes, correct, Afia. Chemical reaction happens between the lichen and the rocks, and this results in breakdown of the rocks and production of soil, right? Is this clear to everyone? Is this okay? Yeah, thanks Afia for actively participating. Does everyone else also find everything okay about this slide and what is primary succession? Alright, thanks for that. Let's move on. So, can somebody in their own words describe what a community is? We have already studied this in, I think, the first or the second lecture, first and the second lecture. Can somebody tell me what is a community? You can describe it in your own words. Don't worry about definitions. What is a community?
Madam, good evening. Hello.
Hi Rajshri. Yes, tell me.
It is a habitat where a community is a group of different species
Okay.
living in a particular geographical area.
Okay, excellent. And what is above a community when you talk about ecological hierarchy? What comes at the next level after community? That's okay.
Ecosystem.
Yeah, so Afia has mentioned ecosystem. Yeah, that's great. And what comes below community?
Is it society, madam?
I think society is more of a social system structure, but
Okay.
it's not society. But there's another there's another category that comes. No, Afia, it's not species. Levels of ecological organization. What do you start with? Okay, so you start with a species, then you have something in between, and then you have a community. So what is before? What is between species and community? Population, right? So you have a species which is an individual of, like a species, an individual, that is the smallest unit of an ecological organization. A group of species living together in a particular area form a population. Populations of several species in a particular area form a community. And community, how does community go into ecosystem at the level of organization? I'm just recapping your first two lectures. Does anybody remember what is the difference between a community and an ecosystem? Association with the environment. Yes, that's correct. When you go into the ecosystem format, it is an association of the community with the abiotic factors, also known as the environment. All right. So I hope everybody knows what a community is now. All right. So you have to fill in the blanks out here. So what does it say? Dash can be defined in various ways, but in essence, they are dynamic boundaries and transitional areas between two very distinct ecological habitats containing different communities and physiochemical features. Does anyone know? This is a terminology used in ecology. What terminology fits out here? And a few examples of such associations have been defined as saltwater and freshwater systems meet at a dash, terrestrial and marine ecosystems meet at a dash. These are also names of the word that has been defined in the first blank out there. Does anyone have an idea? Okay, Afia says ecotone. What about the others? Anybody else? Has any?
Biogeographical habitat.
Okay.
Biogeographical.
Okay, what is a biogeographical realm? What is a biogeographical realm?
It contains biotic and abiotic factors.
Okay, and when you talk about biogeographical zones of, let's say, for example, India, what are you talking about? What is being talked about?
India has many biogeographical zones like alpine zone,
Right,
alpine forests,
right,
alpine grassland, desert zone,
right.
and
So these are all different.
equatorial forests.
Right. So these are all different habitats, right? But in the definition given out here, it's and these are all different habitats that have some fixed or some defining parameters, right? But in the definition, if you read out here, it's written that these particular zones or this term are dynamic boundaries and transitional areas between two very distinct ecological habitats. So the key is in that. And yeah.
Saltwater and freshwater systems meet at lagoons.
Well, no, that is not the term. That is not, you're close, but that's not exactly the term. But as Afia mentioned, it's correct. It's known as an ecotone. Is there anybody who has not heard of this term, ecotone, amongst the set of people who are here? Everybody has heard of ecotone? Thumbs up to that, or thumbs down to that. We need some participation. Okay, apart from Rajeshri and Afia. Okay, well, we have no participation, so that's fine. So, does anyone have an idea where saltwater and freshwater ecosystems meet at? You've all heard of this term. We have these in India. What is the term known for an ecotone region where saltwater and freshwater systems meet? Where do you think this can happen? Where can saltwater and freshwater meet? If you think of geography and the landscape of India, where do you think such an interaction can happen? Where do you think it can happen? Correct. That's absolutely right. Right at the end of a river where it joins the sea. And what are these areas called? You're absolutely right about the term, the area of it. Okay, you don't know the term. Okay, that's okay. Anybody else? Do you know the term? If you don't know, you can all thumbs down to it.
Estuary, madam.
Right, it's an estuary. Right? It's an estuary where the rivers meet the sea at the mouth. Right? And what about terrestrial and marine ecosystems? Where do they meet? This is also quite present in India in a lot of areas. Where do you think terrestrial and marine ecosystems can meet? Sea beach, yeah, it is. It's definitely at the coast. Could all of you tell me from which state in India do you belong or where you are residing? Okay, West Bengal. Any other states? Maharashtra. Okay. Others? Andhra. Okay.
I am from Karnataka.
Karnataka. Okay. So, Maharashtra, Andhra, and West Bengal do have these areas. I'm not sure about Andhra, but I'm not sure about Karnataka. But the other three states, I know for sure they have these areas, especially West Bengal. It's very famous. Correct, right?
Mangroves.
It's Sundarban. It's the mangroves. It's a mangrove ecosystem where your terrestrial and marine ecosystems meet, right? And these areas are also so fascinating because they have a very high biodiversity. I need to quickly look up if Karnataka also has mangroves. I'm sure they do. Let me see. Okay. Oh, okay. So Uttara Kannada has a huge, about 10 square kilometers of open mangroves. So, yes, anywhere on the coast you would presumably definitely find mangroves. So, yeah, mangroves have a huge biodiversity but also suffer from a lot of threat. And do you know why mangroves are very important to us? Anybody? Do you know why mangroves are important?
They are a rearing ground for fish species, various fish species, and
Mm-hmm.
they help even crocodiles also, saline crocodiles,
Okay.
and they are the habitat of various piscivorous birds.
Right, right. So mangroves are a very rich ecosystem that supports a huge biodiversity, whether it could be plants or animals. And Afia says that they also keep the environment safe from soil erosion. They do perform ecological services, such as especially like storms and adverse weather conditions. They help in reducing the impacts of anything coming from the sea to the land, because they have very dense roots, and these rooting systems go deep down into the soil and hold these mangrove structures and act as breakers for any turbulence that is originating from the sea and moving towards the land. So, mangroves are very important to the ecosystem. And as Rajshri mentioned, they are also extremely important for maintaining biodiversity. They also do capture a large amount of carbon dioxide and sequester them. So, that is another role that mangroves do play for the ecosystem. And as Rajshri mentioned, they also have a lot of fish that reside out here that provide food and for various other species. And there are a lot of marine mammals also that are found out here. So I don't know if you have heard of manatees. They are like sea elephants, known as sea elephants. Manatees are also found in mangroves, and certain animals and creatures only are endemic to mangrove like habitats. So if these mangrove like habitats are uh, cleared due to some anthropogenic stress, all these insects, not insects, well, insects also surely, but vertebrates and invertebrates will vanish. So that's a little bit about mangrove ecosystem and why they are important. So moving on to theories of community ecology. So Dash's theory of community ecology assumes that the difference between members of an ecological community of trophically similar species are neutral or irrelevant to their success. Any idea as to who this scientist was?
B. Madam Clement.
Okay. Any other guesses from others? Yes, no, you can also say no if you are not aware. No? Okay. Great. So it is actually Clemens. And Clemens assumed that ecological communities were compared to these kind of superorganisms where interactions of different species were responsible for the evolution of a community. And he, in his view, superorganisms were the fundamental unit, and these keep on changing throughout the community. So, Gleason was the other person who had his theories on community ecology, and he believed that the abundance of species fluctuates independently of one another through successional period and not mutually beneficial associations. So his idea was termed as individualistic, and a group of species having similar physical chemical niche requirements. Right? So these are the two people that propose their views of ecological success of community ecology. All right, so we have an image that is shown out here, and it's take a minute to look at this illustration. It is taken from a paper, and can someone just describe what is happening out here? In your own words, we can have a discussion on this. So, what does it show us broadly? Trophic gills, right? So, what really are these trophic gills? They are so. What is highlighted out here? What are trophic gills? If you have to simplify this even more, what does it highlight? When you talk about gills of a particular taxa, like here, you can see it's centered around birds. Let's just take this similar resource using organisms group. Okay, and what is the difference between these groups out here? So, which are the two main categories that are shown out here? They are trophic gills of aquatic and terrestrial, right? So, in the terrestrial ecosystem, when you are looking at organization of trophic levels, which is basically, I don't know if you can see the pointer, but 1 second. Yeah. So these are your resource category and these are your aggregated resource. So you have the trophic levels going from aquatic 1 to 3 and here terrestrial 1 to 3, right? So you have at the terrestrial ecosystem, you first have the primary producers, which are the fruit, seeds, leaves, nectar, parts of the plant, and these are consumed by invertebrates, soil invertebrates, which are in turn consumed by mammals, birds, and other lizards or herbs. And out here in the aquatic ecosystem, the functional unit of the primary producer here is a plankton, and it is consumed by other invertebrates and marine fauna such as crabs, and then these invertebrates and marine fauna is in turn consumed by fishes. So now you here have three classes of birds on either side that forage on a particular trophic level, right? So these terms are also known as foraging guilds. So can someone think of different foraging guilds in let's look at birds only, but birds in the city. So in your city, which is the most common bird species that you see around you, or in your wherever you are staying? Name one bird species found near your home that you can see from your home. I'd like to get that from everywhere. Okay, so one has, okay, everybody house crow. Okay, apart from house crow is one option. Okay, tell me some other birds.
Tailor bird.
Okay, rock pigeon, tailor bird.
Sunbird.
Okay.
Purple rumped sunbird.
Okay, so I'm just gonna put sunbird, tailor bird. Okay, great. So now let's take these four birds. What do you think a crow eats? What would you classify its dietary niche as?
It's omnivorous, madam.
Correct. They are omnivorous, right? So you can't really fit them into any foraging guild as such. What about your rock pigeon? What do they feed on? Grains. Yeah, not insects. Grains. So
Okay.
so they are of the what is the category of birds that they will be clubbed into? Just like omnivore, like that you have. Any guesses? Of animals that eat grains, what would they be called?
Granivore.
Yes, granivorous species, right? Because they only consume grains of any kind. Can you think of another bird that is common in cities, like probably seen everywhere along an urban to rural gradient, which is also predominantly a granivorous species of bird? It's common. Sparrow, right? So sparrows and rock pigeons are granivorous bird species. Now you have also sunbirds. What do sunbirds have? What do they feed on?
Nectarivore.
Right. So they feed on nectar from plants. And what about tailor bird?
Insectivore.
So the tailor bird is an insectivore, right? So now if you think of a crow, a pigeon, a sparrow, a sunbird and a tailor bird, what features in them help them specialize on certain food types?
Their beak size, madam.
Yeah,
Shape of the beak.
yeah, the shape of the beak, right? And that is also very evident in this image given alongside out here. You have, let's focus on the wetland species. So you have these ducks out here that consume plankton. How do they do these? The ducks are usually dabblers or divers. So if you take a dabbling duck, they'll just like upturn themselves and just skim their mouth through different aquatic, like the plants growing on the top, and they'll eat that. These aquatic insectivore birds have these long probing like beak structures to capture insects from the various foraging strata. It could be even water plants, etc., insects on the plants or insects floating on the water directly. Similarly, in terrestrial plant consumers, like here it looks like a parrot, but if you see your pigeon and your sparrows, they have specialized beaks to feed on grains. They are like finch like birds, especially the sparrow. For insectivorous terrestrial birds, they have these tiny beaks that can enable them to fly and also catch species of insects. And then you have these carnivores at the top, where you have the piscivores in the aquatic ecosystem, where they have these large pointed beaks, and they also have a very long neck, so that they can like shoot into the water and pick up any swimming fish. And you have the carnivores in the terrestrial side that have these curved beaks that help them in tearing the flesh apart. So if you notice the beak shapes of all these birds, they can give you a clue as to what kind of food they consume and which foraging guild they belong to. So beak diversification is a great clue to understand foraging guilds. Okay, so dash species are the first to colonize a barren habitat or an area affected by disturbances. So please put your answers in the chat box. So you have keystone species, you have ecotone species, you have vital species, and you have pioneer species. Okay, what about the rest? What do you feel? Afia and Rajshri say it's D, which are pioneer species. Okay, so Afia and Rajshri, you are correct. It is indeed a pioneer species. Okay, so look at the diagram given alongside. I should have made the figure a little bit larger. So you have out here resource on the x-axis you have number of individuals using the resource on the y-axis, and these show two types of niches, right? Can someone tell me what is the definition of a niche? What is really exactly a niche? What are these realized niches and fundamental niches? Okay, so it's not the role of an organism. It's not even the relation. Right, it's the habitat or the place where the organism lives or can live, right? So now tell me, which niche is usually always lesser than or equal to the dash the other niche? So which is the smaller niche? Right. So the realized niche is a smaller niche, right? It seems that my question number C is an incomplete. So can someone tell me what is the difference between the realized niche and the fundamental niche? Anybody? Fundamental niche has no competition. Okay. What are the differences, the broad differences? So we can say that the realized niche is smaller than the fundamental niche. The realized niche has competition, the fundamental niche has no competition. Right, so the fundamental niche is actually any given space that a species can occupy or is suitable for it to occupy, right? So the the realized niche has limitations. Okay, what do you mean by limitations? Any factors that could be limitations? So right, so you have resource availability, you have competition, right? So all these are like limitations. So an organism can possibly live in this much of a large space, but it only lives in a much smaller space, and that is only because uh, it is a theoretical concept, right? The fundamental niche is a theoretical concept that shows an entire area where a particular species can survive, but the thresholds or the bounds of actual survival are restricted to a much smaller area that is known as a realized niche, right? So I hope this is clear to everyone. Just go to the next slide. All right. So when we are talking about niches and again, for example, birds, because so I study birds, so please ignore the repeated references of birds in this particular session. But I'm not sure if all of you have been following the news. So there is this concept known as the state of India's birds, and this just came out was released in Delhi about a week or two ago, And this basically is an endeavor that covers all the birds of India and their basic statuses, right? So here you, in the figure alongside, I can show you also the website after we do this. This particular two bird species have a different range distribution, right? So this is the year-round distribution for the white-bellied Sholakili and the Indian roller. So for a species that is such range restricted and has a small specialized niche, what kind of a species will it be called as compared to the Indian roller, which is found, as you can see, in the distribution of India all over India? So Afia says specialist and generalist. Are there any alternate terms or other terms that can be used for such a situation? Does everybody know what is a specialist and a generalist? Right. So which is an endemic species out here? Right. So the Sholakili is an endemic species, and what is the other species? It's not an endemic species, right? Right, it's quite widespread, so it's not an endemic species. So as Afia says, the survival to survive a specific habitat, it's a habitat special species. Yes, so this is a very range restricted species that is found in a very small area, and it is restricted to a certain habitat type, which as you can see, even though it can fly and it's a bird, it is not everywhere else, right? It is only in this such a tiny area in South India, right? And these are high elevation species, whereas you have the Indian roller that is all over the Indian peninsula and like going right up from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So as Afia mentioned, they are known as specialist species. The Indian roller is a specialist species, and the white-bellied Sholakili is a generalist species. So let me just show you the State of Indian Birds website, from where. So this is one of the very big challenges taken up by a lot of scientists from all over India, and they have created this beautifully illustrated book known as the State of Indian Birds. You can scroll down the website, they've got some highlights, the report, threats, methods, systemic monitoring, and covers all the species. So it covers about 942 species with about 30 million observations from bird watchers from all over the world, but having studied only the species that are found in India. This is being studied from a platform known as EBird, which I mentioned earlier. This is an online citizen science platform. So do feel free to explore this site. You can explore all species also. If you want to explore a particular bird, so let's say house sparrow. So I can say house sparrow, and this will show me the distribution of the house sparrow all over the country. If I zoom in a little more, I will see that they have different colors, right? They have year round, which means it's found all throughout the year. In these regions, it's found in the summer and spring, autumn, and winter in other areas. It also shows you some trend lines, and there is a graph shown out here. In addition to this, there are some stats and different state trends for all the states in India, right? So like this, like for example, Indian, what else can I say? Let's say sunbird, purple sunbird, a purple round sunbird, because that should be in all the places. Yeah, so it's mostly in the lower half of the Indian subcontinent, and based on the data that they have recorded, their current trend is termed as inconclusive. The distribution range is very large, and then also a bunch of other factors. So do feel free to explore this website and check out all the birds that are found around you as well. I think that will be like a really nice thing that you could do. All right. Why have I lost my tab? Okay, so a climax community controlled by the soil community is called a catastrophic climax, an edaphic climax, a disk climax, or a climatic climax. Any ideas? Please put in the options in the chat if that works best. Okay, Afia says edaphic climax. What about the others? What do you feel? Just take a guess if you don't know. Okay, right. Yeah, that's okay not to know. So yes, indeed, it is an edaphic climax, which is the topmost community climax controlled by soil. What about a catastrophic climax? Any idea what this could be controlled by? It's in the name itself. It's not soil, but what could a catastrophic climax be caused by? Catastrophe, right? Yeah, that's correct. What about a disk climax? What could be a disk climax caused by? What events? Human disturbances. Yes, that's correct. And a climatic climax is caused by climatic factors, right? Alright, so the type of succession wherein previous plants and animal communities are able to be replaced by a newer community is termed as autogenic succession, primary succession, secondary succession, or allogenic succession. Okay. Rajhi says secondary succession. What about the others? Any guesses? So Rajshri says it's secondary succession. What do the others feel? What kind of succession is this? If you don't know, please just mention don't know. Okay. Okay. So as Rajeshi mentioned, it is definitely secondary succession, which is, so everybody knows what is primary succession, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Right. So primary succession is when you start from barren land and then the land slowly progresses with the different stages of succession, and then finally you have some primary growth forest, right? But in certain cases you can have a huge disturbance, and the disturbance can be uh, forest fires or some catastrophe, etc., where the complete community is wiped off and a new community comes place in that particular land, and this is known as secondary succession. So it's a complete replacement of all the animals and plants that were present in this area before, right? So that is called secondary succession. Anyone has an idea of what is allogenic succession and autogenic succession? Any ideas? Allogenic and autogenic succession? No? Yes? You can take a guess also. Okay. Um, so, so Rajeshri, this is also a term of succession. Nothing is getting transported from anywhere to anywhere, but these are certain factors that are leading to succession. So, in autogenic succession, it is a particular factor that is responsible for driving the succession, and in allogenic, it is another factor. So, that's a hint. Biotic and abiotic, that's correct. So, what is biotic? Which is biotic? Which succession consists of biotic factors? Is it autogenic or allogenic? Autogenic, yes, that's correct. Alright. So, a species most frequently found in a particular community but also present occasionally in other communities is known as a what kind of species? Is it an indifferent species, preferential species, accidental species, or selective species? Okay, Afya says selective species. Others? Anybody else? Okay, so Afya, you're right, it is indeed selective species. So, tell me which of the following orders of basic processes are involved in succession? Discuss this earlier, give me which is the right option. Take a minute to read it. You can put in your answers in the chat box. Is a specialist species a selective species? No, the specialist species in this case, if you're referring to the white-bellied Cholaculi, it's not a selective species, because what is a selective species? A selective species is most frequently found in a particular community but also present in other communities. So the Cholaculi is not present in any other community except for these tropical high elevation mountainous communities. Because if it were so, if you see the distribution map of this bird, it would have been present in other areas also which have at that elevation, etc. But it doesn't, probably there is no other site that has that mix of climatic and habitat factors that might make it suitable for the Cholaculi, right? So yes, as all of you have guessed, this is the correct answer, and it is D, which is nudation, which is basically breakdown; migration, which is movement; excesses, which is again I think uh, movement of some kind; aggregation, coming together; reaction, where a process happens and then that stabilizes, right? So that's the entire progress. Alright, let's go to the next slide. So basically, disturbances are classified by these three terms, which is pulse, press, and ramp, and they constitute a major force influencing, even determining the structure functions of ecological components such as populations, communities, and ecosystems. The capacity to weather a disturbance without loss is defined as dash, whereas dash is the capacity to recover from a disturbance after incurring losses which may be considerable. So let's just take a minute to look at the figure that is highlighted out here, and what you can see is again, this is, one second, just make this larger. Yeah, that's better. Right, so now you can see the figure better. Out here you see that one of the lines at the x-axis shows you ecosystem state, right? It is moving from left to right on the x-axis, and the other icon shows you energy potential, right? Which is basically moving from low to high, right? So now there are three lines of the black ball that you see out here is a factor of disturbance. Okay, so now when you have low resistance and high resilience, so we have to fill in the blanks with two words, resistance and resilience, right? So when you have low resistance and high resilience, you have almost a balanced state. When you have high resistance and low resilience, you have rapid fluctuation at the bottom, and then when you have low resistance and low resilience, your energy potential completely drops. Is this confusing to everybody? Okay, so Afia says resilience and resistance. Resistance and resilience. Rajeshri says resistance and resilience. So when you have low resistance, the capacity to weather a disturbance without loss is defined as resistance, which is correct, and the capacity which is known as resilience is the capacity to recover, right? So that's great, you all have understood the concept well. Alright, so we have a factor known as the community dominance index. It is a percentage of abundance that is contributed by the how many most abundant species. Is it 2, 4, 6 or 5? You can use the chat box. Afia is not aware. Anybody? It's an equation that is covered in your lectures as well. Nobody? No idea? Okay, alright. So if you look at the equation, it shows you the two most abundant species, right? The two most abundant species are defined as those that are covered in the community dominance index, right? So that's the correct answer. Okay, so what is a keystone species? A keystone species is one that is usually a primary producer, has a critically important role in determining the species composition of its community, is always a predator, or it reduces the species diversity in a community. So, which of the following answers is correct? B, 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 B. Everybody agrees. Right. So everybody agrees it is B. Can someone tell me an example that we have covered in the previous lectures that is very similar to this, but not at this scale? Okay, tiger in Sundarban. Okay, they are keystone species. Yes, definitely. So what's really happening in this case? Right. So yes, they are all top predators, tigers and leopards. So what is happening in this case where the sea otters are interacting in a community with kelp and sea urchin? So in a community where sea otters are present, there is a good balance because sea otters feed on sea urchins and sea urchins feed on kelp. So if the sea otters are regulating the population of sea urchin, then you don't have so much of decline in kelp. But the minute you remove sea otters from the ecosystem, from this community, what is happening is that the sea urchins are proliferating in number and they are all feeding on the sea kelp. The scalp, and that tends to be overgrazed. And the same thing is seen in a trophic community where you have these top carnivore predators, where if these carnivore predators are absent, you have an increase in the number of herbivore prey, and the herbivore prey end up consuming all the grass and plants that are in the ecosystem, and then that leads to a break in the ecosystem functioning because there are no more plants and it leads to overgrazing, right? And yes, Afia, we did cover an example of trophic cascades where we have seen an example of the Yellowstone National Park, but that is also interactions with the the abiotic community, where we saw that removal of these particular wolves or introduction of the wolves into reintroduction of the wolves to Yellowstone National Park uh, finally in downstream processing ended up changing the courses of the rivers itself, right? But that was a huge process, and we saw the video over it. There are both sides to the coin, but yeah, we've already had this discussion earlier. All right. So, which of these types of environments is most likely to experience the arrival of a pioneer species? Is it an old growth forest, an undisturbed prairie, an established mountain lake, or a newly formed volcanic island? Put in your answers in the chat box, please. D, D, A and D. Okay, I don't know actually what you were going for. Okay, D only. Okay. Alright, so yes, that is the correct answer. What about which plant characteristics are common to pioneer species? Plants with roots that act as wedges to slowly break apart rocks, plants with long, thick roots that tap into deep water supplies, trees with exposed surface roots that trap soil and vegetation, or plants with a broad matte surface of roots that quickly soak up water. In a hypothetical situation where you have a plant as a pioneer species, which of these plant features would be most suited for it to be classified as a pioneer species? That's the question. Okay, Afia says A. Others? Okay, so multiple answers for A, and that is the correct answer. So we are actually done with the questions and concepts for this week. Did anyone have any questions? Or any particular things that you would like to cover in detail? Are any of you using any citizen science platforms like EBird, iNaturalist, Project Noah? I found butterfly. Oh, that's interesting. Actually, I have not heard of that. eBird and iNaturalist. Okay, great. So I think for common across taxa species, iNaturalist is definitely one of the best platforms. Are any of you interested in particular taxa or particular questions in ecology? No? Is anyone interested, or is anyone interested in doing like small projects or something in ecology? Because then iNaturalist is a great way of doing this, and today we covered our class on community. So if you are interested in studying the community of arthropods or spiders or birds in your area, I think it might be a good idea to go outside and go outdoors if you can, if that's a possibility, and document these you know um, species communities in different areas. So, for example, if you are near a forest, or if you are near a wetland, or if you are near a water body or a marshland or a road, you can pick different habitat types. And let's say, for example, you are focusing on spiders or birds, see how your habitat results in a difference in community of species, right? So near wetland you might find certain species, near your grasslands you might find certain species, forest certain species, urban areas certain species. Some species might be common to all areas, but some species will be only specific to certain areas. And this you can note down on iNaturalist and make a log. So just by being where you are, you don't need to go into a forest or some field site. Just in your city or town, you would be able to look at different communities of species across taxa and use these common citizen science platforms to in fact find out species identities. So that is something you could do if you are interested in. And if anybody wants to engage in ecology further and do small projects, etc., I would strongly encourage you to do this as well if you are interested. Anybody from I cannot figure out how to calculate Jacquard's index and dominance index. Okay, can you help me? Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks, Afia. I'll take a note of this. So the next time I will prepare some slides that can include Jacquard's index and dominance index. So dominance index was the one we just covered right now, right? We can put up some problems for that. And also, if I do find any resources, I can share it with you as well. But we can cover this in the next class. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, then thanks for joining in today, and we will meet next week on Tuesday. Alright, thanks everyone. Catch you next week. Alright, thanks Afia. Thanks for joining in and thanks for being so proactive. Yeah, thanks. I don't know your name, but yeah, thank you.